This week on the Orange Box Podcast, we talk about the potential Steam Deck 2 release timing, new bizarre information on the cancellation of The Last of Us 2's multiplayer, an extremely helpful new Steam feature coming soon, and more. All of this tonight, but first, on to the new Beautiful Bean intro. Welcome to the place where PC and console gaming talk combine. This is the Orange Box Podcast, episode 131. I am your host, the man who would drive his piano 1,000 miles if he could just see you, Nathan, also known as the Frozen Gamer 87. And joining me, as always, the man who can parry attacks with a single look, Justin, better known as I Am Zaracon. How you doing today? How's your week been?
It's been pretty good. Last week, of course, I mentioned that I was a little under the weather. I took a couple days, or rather outside of the work days, primarily just to get some rest and whatnot. And I had Friday off for Good Friday, so, got to sleep in and get some rest there. So definitely a whole lot better now. Still have a little bit of ick in me, but for the most part, it's all better. Sunday, went and had a lunch with my grandfather, also my mother, my aunt, and my uncle, and a few cousins were there as well, so we went to see him and we had lunch together. Later on, though, after we left, I went and made dinner. So because this was a collaborative dinner, I made some garlic tomato kale, I made some mashed potatoes, and I made some macaroni and cheese. I would have made some corn too, but just because I got home later than I anticipated, didn't really have time to do that. But everything turned out pretty well, and I think for some reason the kale tasted better than it had been the previous few times. But granted, I know that I had to purchase frozen kale just because I knew I didn't have time to, or at least when I went shopping, it would have been a while and the kale would have gotten a bit bad, so I had to buy a frozen kale. So that might have been why it tasted a whole lot better this time, since it was fresh. But yeah, I think it turned out pretty well. Yeah, that's really everything that's happened this week.
All right. Yeah, when as soon as you mentioned kale, all I can think of is that line from Cheers, which, without it's a pain to explain the context. Not so much a pain, but it's just like there's a lot to explain the context. But the line is,
well, you can really taste the kale,
and it just made me think of that. So anyway, so let's see here. I'm trying to think my week. There really wasn't a whole lot apart from like Saturday being super busy because since we were hosting Sunday for Easter, we had to do cleaning and I had to do a bunch of cooking, both doing the actual stuff for Sunday dinner, specifically like doing refried beans and the cheese sauce and cooking multiple kinds of chorizo. I can't remember if I did this. I think I did the sauce for the chorizo marinade. No, I did that. I did the sauce on Friday so that I could get it marinating overnight and then cooked it on Saturday. But there's that. And then I had to do a bunch of prep too, for the prep and cook green Thai curry, which I made for both my family and family from our church, for a meal train thing. And yeah, so it was just a really busy, tiring day. By the end of the day, I was just exhausted and ended up being just unfortunately Sunday there's still quite a bit of cleaning that had to be done because I couldn't do a whole lot of cleaning. And the kids did their part, my wife did her part, and then the kitchen still needed to be cleaned. So I spent most of the afternoon cleaning that and ended up just being still very busy. So it wasn't as relaxing on Sunday as I would have liked, because usually Sunday's day I will just take the rest for the day, but that's all right. Still a good visit with the family and everything. Everything turned out good, and my sister brought tamales, and those were good, and all that kind of stuff. I feel like there was something that happened on Monday, but maybe not. Yeah, I can't really think of anything with that, but of course today we got to do the first ultrasound for our baby, and we confirmed it is one baby and not two babies. So everything's on track with that. Baby's only 2 centimeters long at this point, but we got to hear the heartbeat and everything, which is always very cool. 8.5 weeks and hearing the heartbeat. The next appointment will be at 12 weeks, and there's a blood test they do. I can't remember exactly how it works, but basically my understanding is they draw the mom's blood, but the baby's DNA is mixed in there as well. So in that, not only that can they test for certain things, like if there's potential for Down syndrome and that sort of thing, but also they can find out if the baby's a boy or a girl. And that, how exactly that works, I don't exactly understand all that, but I do know that it works because it worked for our second son. We found out that he was a boy at 12 weeks. So, and then, it was confirmed, obviously, once we had the actual, I can't remember what they call it, but anyway, the point at 20 weeks when you can actually get a look and see, okay, is it a boy or a girl based on the ultrasound? So, yeah. So we'll probably find out early what we're having, whether we're having another girl or another boy. And I'm happy either way. I'm just glad. I just know that my wife told me, even though, she doesn't get morning sickness in her pregnancies, but she does have like this bleh feeling all the time, a lot of the times, and just certain foods sound really awful to her, and she'll have certain cravings, of course, but none of this is like as much as when she's actually in second trimester and so on. So she told me that this is going to be the last one, and it's like fair enough. We're both old enough at this point that I'm perfectly satisfied with stopping at 4, and God willing, we'll have our new baby, boy or girl, in November. So excited about that. My kids don't know this yet, and they won't hear the podcast, and the only people who could tell them the only people who listen who could tell them would be their cousins, but by that point it would already be done. Tomorrow, God willing, as long as I'm feeling well enough, we're going to take the kids to go see the Mario Galaxy movie after I get off work. So looking forward to that. I've heard good things from people who enjoyed the first one, that they really enjoyed the second one. It's like, okay, good. That's all I wanted to hear. Because it's like, who cares what the critics say? The critics hated the first one, and the critics, most of the time, their taste is horrible. They say something's good, and it's like, oh, I better steer clear of that. And then if they say that it's bad, then it's like, well, maybe not. We'll see. And critics also said that, like, the Venom movies were terrible. And while I can definitely understand the second one not being as good, the first one was hilarious. It was fantastic. I loved it. But yeah. I feel like there's something else. Maybe not. Yeah, that's about it. I guess I will just mention, like, I'm not sure if I'm sick or if it's allergies, but basically it's just in my throat, but it's like a gnarly feeling, and it's been like that. Basically, started sometime yesterday. Like yesterday morning, I woke up and it was kind of feeling like that, and then several hours later, I was feeling fine, and then I went back outside and started feeling worse again, and then the whole day today, it's just felt terrible. So otherwise I feel completely normal, but yeah, so I have no idea if it's actually allergies or if it's a cold that's just in my throat. Either way, it sucks, and I'll be drinking a lot of fluids during the podcast to hopefully help it get a little bit of relief. But yeah, that's the extent of it.
Okay. Yeah, definitely very excited for you. Glad that you're getting more information. And I definitely know you are looking forward to the 12 weeks threshold, so that way you can get some more information and learn more about your childhood. But definitely glad to hear that everything's going well so far. Definitely glad to see the photo. And also let me know if you do see it tomorrow, how the Super Mario Galaxy movie is, because I really enjoyed the first one, and I mean, I thought the movie, it was so much better than I had thought it was going to be, and I was actually very surprised that critics actually didn't like that. I don't know why, but it was a good movie, and I would say the best video game film that I've ever seen. So if this second one is just on the same level, then I'm willing to be willing to enjoy that as well. And if my sister doesn't do anything with her kids yet, I know she already talked about it, maybe I'll go and get my niece and nephew and take them to see that at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Well, I know your list is short for this week, but what have you been playing?
Yeah, so I've only been playing Castlevania Portrait of Ruin, and I made a whole lot more progress than I expected. Initially, I was just going to clear a few portraits and see what I was doing there. Eventually, I ended up in the clock tower area, which I was immediately, as soon as I walked in there, I was like, this isn't going to be a fun time. Medusa heads flying everywhere, gears turning around. It wasn't fun, and I was really just trying to breeze through that area as fast as possible because I knew it was not going to be fun at all. However, at the end of the clock tower is when I really hit my first brick wall in this game. And that was death. And the problem is that you can barely deal any damage to death at all. Like, one hit, essentially. And if you're trying to use any of your other abilities that I've used, like the axe, he's completely impervious to those. So, like, you just used your base weapon, and you only deal 1 damage, essentially. And several things were going through my mind at first, because I know that at one point he creates a cage, and that you can actually deal more damage to the hands of that cage than to him. And I thought, okay, maybe that's the key. I have to keep hitting the hands instead of him because those are his weak points. I kept dying to him several times, just because he does have this one attack where he will have a bunch of hands come and grab you. And if you don't break free, which I didn't even realize a couple times until probably my third death, that I could actually break free if I had another character help me, or if I had the other character, get caught instead, is that he will one-shot you. It doesn't matter if you have, like a little bit of health or full health or near full health. He kills you instantly. So that was another reason why I had a bit of a difficulty with him. And then at one point, I don't know what it was exactly initially when I was doing this, but then I saw, hey, he is actually changing color. That means I must be in his next phase or something. So I was like, all right, cool. It's, apparently, I guess you can actually beat him. And so then I kept going, but I kept dying at the same time. I was wondering, okay, something's not right here. Like, there's no reason why I'm still only dealing 1 damage to him. I can still get him to the second phase, and nothing's working. So I eventually thought, okay, I know that as far as this plot goes, I don't have access to the full vampire killer since I'm not a Belmont. So I thought maybe I need to go beat another area in the game, and then I can get access to the full power, and I can, actually deal damage. I kept looking around everywhere, and there was no new points for me to go to. So I said, all right, I probably still have to beat him. I kept trying, and I said to myself eventually, I'm gonna try and see if this works or not. I haven't used my my team attack on him at all. So I said, let me see what happens. I used it. I'm actually dealing 33 damage, which is something more akin to normal damage.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, that's pretty cool. And then I realized, you know what? And it was actually until I confirmed this later on, is that he does have one phase, but you have to deal magic damage to him to get him to shift to another phase when he actually is susceptible to physical damage.
That makes sense.
And then he switches back and forth between the two, which I didn't get that until multiple tries later. But then eventually I was able to beat him, and I was like, all right, that's cool. That was fun. I hate that it took this many times to get through, but I kept going after that. And so then eventually I went and I got to the twin sisters, Stella and Loretta, and I beat them. And then, you have to go, and before you can face Bronner, who is one of the main antagonists of the game, you do have to go through like 4 other portraits that are sort of like the keys that block access to his portrait. So I went through, cleared those, and I decided before I do that though, you can go and take the challenge of the whip to, get full access to Vampire Killer. So I went in, and it took me multiple tries because Richter deals a whole lot of damage to you with just his whip alone. And I mean, and you can keep, retrying it. It doesn't, when you lose, you don't die or anything like that. It just, it kicks you out, and you have to keep going back in to do the trial. But after a few attempts, I said, I'm going to go ahead and just clear out some more areas and then, level up some and then come back, which I think definitely helped a whole lot, because when I came back later on, I was able to deal more damage. And then probably after maybe 4 or 5 more attempts, I was able to beat him. So I did eventually go ahead, beat Bronner, and then I kept, was able to actually get to the end of the game. And I'm right at the boss fight with Dracula now. I'll definitely talk more about this next week, but just because of how this boss fight is set up, it's probably going to take me a few more attempts, just because it is a bit different than your typical Dracula fight. But yeah, I've definitely enjoyed the game so far. I'm not entirely certain if I'll go and do all of the, I guess, side content per se, because there are certain quests you can do, but some of those are sort of grindy and also require you to either be in a certain state like curse and then come back and then present your curse. But by the time I've tried to do that, my curse wore off, so like it wasn't really working for me. So I'll decide if I want to do that. But as far as the baseline game goes, I'm definitely enjoying it, and I would say I'm enjoying it more now after spending more time in it than I was early on in the game, when I thought it's nice, but it feels a bit gimmicky in a sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really everything I have to say.
All right. Yeah, I'm glad to see that you're nearly done with it. I know, obviously, like I've said, I need to get back to that collection at some point. I have to have the motivation, just be like, okay, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to get through the clock tower, because that's, I know, going to be a hurdle because of all those stupid Medusa heads. And yeah, I probably will abuse the rewind feature, just because it's kind of like, okay, like I want to enjoy the game, but I don't know. At least I would probably abuse it when I'm dealing with the Medusas, because those are just so obnoxious. But yeah. All right. So in terms of what I've been playing, my list is not long per se, but it's longer than yours. I think it's shorter than my last week's list, but so first of all, I just want to mention there's 2 games I played briefly that I don't have any footage recorded for. It was just basically something that I kind of messed around with a little bit at one point. One of which was because I didn't have any game systems with me, and I just needed something to unwind. So I pulled up Streets of Rage 2 on my phone because, you know, I got all those Sega Classic games before they listed them from Android. And I will say right now, playing with touch controls is garbage. It is so bad. So bad, especially for that game. But I happen to have my controller, my QRD controller in my backpack, and I had a USB-C to USB-C controller, so I plugged it into my phone, and then I could play with the controller, which made it much better. But I couldn't remember how to record footage, so I didn't even bother trying. But then very, very briefly on Sunday, I wanted to show my brother-in-law one of the decompilations on Steam Deck, so I showed him Mario Kart 64. Just literally did one race, and that was it. But yeah, so stuff that I played a bit more. First of all, I want to mention, so I got my physical copies of Salt and Sanctuary and Salt and Sacrifice. Those came yesterday, yes. But I had also ordered a physical copy of Baten Kaitos, the HD Remaster Collection. And those were originally GameCube games, and they put them out on Switch and PC and elsewhere. So I had gotten the physical copy of that, and I don't have any footage recorded from the Switch version because I only tested it out briefly. But I did decide, well, let me back up. The Switch version looks really nice on the Switch OLED screen. But the frame rate is kind of all over the place. Like, I guess it's 30 is the target, but it's uncapped. So it can go up to 60, but it's kind of inconsistent from everything I read. Also, they removed the English dub, so it's only Japanese voices, which I know for you like that, but for me, it kind of takes me out sometimes when you have a Japanese dub with English subtitles, unless that's the only language available for the game. And so between that and knowing there's an inconsistent frame rate, at least playing it on Switch 1, even though Switch 2 is supposed to be a consistent, basically a locked 60, you play it on there. I found a key on Instant Gaming for cheap and just bought it on Steam and played a little bit there. So the footage I have here is all Steam Deck footage, and it is locked 90 frames per second the whole time. I got the English dub downloaded and modded into the game. So the English dub is definitely not, the voice acting isn't good, but even with it not being a good dub, it's still was more, it's like it just kind of gets me a little more into the game if I'm doing the actual English voice acting. So I only played like probably 20-30 minutes, and I don't know if you ever played any of these games before, but the battle system is like a card battle system where basically you select when it's your turn to attack, you have attack cards and you have defense cards, and then you, at least starting off, you only get 2 attacks, 2 defense moves. You also have healing items, and then when the opponent attacks you, you can use defense cards to defend yourself, and same with like healing items and that sort of thing. But the thing is that by default, depending on whether it's your attack turn or your defense turn, will determine which one it will automatically targets. So like if you have a healing item come up, for example, during your attack turn, by default it's going to target the enemies. And if you press R, or the right shoulder button, R1, then it will switch it over to your party, and then you can heal yourself, that sort of thing. And then same thing goes with the attack things, is that if you, like, for example, on your turn, if you select a healing item, use it on yourself, and then you select the attack without targeting the enemy, you'll attack yourself. And so it's just kind of like it's having to remember to do that and that sort of thing. And of course, this game's completely new to me, so I made a lot of mistakes. But I do want to mention also, this is a Monolith Soft game, so that was part of what made me interested in it. And I've heard good things about it. It's just a very different battle system that you really have to get used to when it's completely different. It is turn-based as well. So, but yeah, I don't have a lot to say about the game because I really played very, very little. Most of what I did was just kind of wandering around and killing some monsters. Didn't really get into the story. Yeah, there's really not much to it. I'm glad that it runs really well on Steam Deck, and if it ran better on the Switch OLED, I probably would have played it there. But it was between the fact that it's inconsistent on the performance, except on the Switch 2, where I didn't want to play it as much, but also because of the fact that it doesn't have the English dub, which, like I said, just kind of takes me out of the game sometimes, even when the dub isn't very good. So yeah, not a whole lot to say about that otherwise. Like I said, I didn't play very much. But with Salt and Sanctuary, so first of all, I do want to mention let me back up slightly. Okay, so first of all, I want to mention I took down 4 bosses since last week because I didn't play as much. But I took down the Dried King, Bloodless Prince, Murdiel Amal, and the Coveted. I did test out separately on the Switch to see how it runs. Switch 2, I tested it out with the boost mode. I didn't notice any visual differences, but it seemed like it was running at a solid 60, which was good. The Switch 1, it looks a bit better on that screen, in my opinion. But it did have some occasional stutters. It was mostly at 60, but it did have some stutters. And I only basically played long enough to get through the first boss and not much past that. So yeah, not much to say about that. But going back to playing on the Steam Deck, so with the Dried King, I fought this guy a bunch of times. I mean, it's not like Ornstein and Smaug levels of attempts, but it was still a lot of attempts. And most of the attempts I went in with a sword, which I didn't realize he's resistant to slash damage. And so, like, I'm fighting him constantly. I think the clip that's playing right now is the last time I attempted to fight him with a sword, or one of the last times I attempted to fight him with a sword. And I got him down like 3/4 of his health, and then he killed me. And afterwards, I just looked up, okay, is there a cheese method for this guy? And then I saw, oh, he's strong against slash damage, weak against strike damage, and holy. And so I happen to have this, I think it's called the Warhammer, maybe. It's just like a big 2-handed hammer, which I basically had just enough strength to two-hand it. So I go into the fight with this. The first time I go into the fight with this, I'm not expecting to actually beat him, and so I don't start recording. And then he's like almost dead, and so I start recording right at the end. And so what's playing right now is like the last few hits it took for me to take him out, because it made the fight go so much faster. Like, it was ridiculous how much faster it went with that equipped. But yeah, so I learned my lesson from that standpoint. But yeah, it did way more damage, especially when I applied the holy element. That made it do even more. But then I did the Bloodless Prince, and that one took me, I think it only took me a few tries, But I mean, it still took me a handful of tries because, he's big and lugging and hits really hard if he hits. And I don't know what his weaknesses were or not. I think I tried the hammer against him. It wasn't doing much of any damage, so I just stuck with the sword and holy element and, was able to take him out after a while. But he definitely took a while to get through. It was an interesting fight, but yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else really to note about him. That one, it was memorable, and of course, in one sense, but not as memorable in that it didn't take me nearly as many times to beat him as it did some of the others. So, but the one that really took me, it wasn't quite as much as Dried King, but it still took me quite a few tries, was Murdi Alamal, which of course doesn't even have an achievement tied to it, but I just happened to get up to the floating isle or whatever it's called, Mal's floating castle, which but instead of Hal's floating castle. So that was one where I think I tried with the hammer for quite a while before I looked it up and found that she was weaker against slash damage, and I think she was weak against holy as well, maybe fire. I can't remember. I don't remember. Oh yeah, and I had a charm that made it so that my sword had a fire element attached to it for those fights as well. So it's like you have fire plus holy or arcane in the case of one of the later ones. But yeah, so the fight against her, like initially I had found one thing I had found was that there's a certain shield, I can't remember which one it is, but it like blocks all holy damage that she does. But it's like a level 3 great shield or level 4 great shield, and I wasn't really like able to get that. Even with getting rid of some abilities and reapplying stuff, it didn't really help. But once I started using my sword and then blocking the holy attacks as much as I could with the shield I had, and just getting better about dodging and that sort of thing, I was able to take her out. And yeah, that one was definitely a pain. The Coveted didn't take me quite as many tries, but still took me several, and that was one where I found out about that it was also weak against strike damage and strong against slash damage, and so busted out the hammer again, which in removing some abilities to try to get myself able to wield that great shield, which ultimately, like I said, I couldn't because I just didn't have enough ability stuff and didn't feel like grinding. I had accidentally removed the thing that made it so that I could two-hand the great hammers, and so I was trying to wield this hammer, and it's like super slow swings, and it just wasn't working at all. And so then thankfully I had enough ability points that I could reacquire that ability, and then I could two-hand it, and went back into that fight, and then it didn't take too long to get through it. But yeah, that one was definitely interesting. And I mean, I haven't gotten to any other bosses yet because I just haven't played a whole lot since I did that. But I'm trying to think if there was anything else. I mean, I got to a couple different locations. Oh, there's I can't remember the name of the location, but you'll know what I'm talking about when I talk about it. So there's one spot. I think it's shortly after you fight, or no, it's the way that you get down to the Coveted. So there's like a bridge that has a gap in it, and then you drop down and you have to land on platforms going down. But the problem is it's so dark that even with a torch you can't see where you're going, and so it took me a little while to figure out that if you follow the water, that tells you which way to go. And so I died quite a few times just dropping down the wrong direction before I finally figured out, oh yeah, the water, if I follow the water trail, it will get me down there. And then went down and fought the Coveted, and after a handful of attempts, was able to beat it. At least on the plus side, I did find the shrine or the sanctuary before that was right next to it before I fought that thing, so that I didn't end up having to retrek through all that. And then, of course, once I actually got all the way through, I could go up the other side and open up the gate so that I wouldn't have to go back down in order to get down there again. Even though I guess I could technically warp as well. But yeah. So, not much else to say about that game. I think right now this is kind of like the game I'm focusing more on because even though I am still playing Death Stranding 2, because this one I know is much shorter than Death Stranding 2, and Death Stranding 2 is probably going to be something that'll be like 100 plus hours, especially to get all the achievements. I'm just kind of like, okay, I've got to this point. I might as well keep going. One last thing I want to mention before I move on to the next game is that there was this one spot where I kind of hit a wall for a little bit. Well, actually two little spots. One of them, I can't remember the name of the area, but there's these like unicorn things in the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
And if they if they impale you, you are dead. You're just dead. The great thing though is that recently I was able to get back down there from a different angle, and I had leveled up my sword enough to where I could basically take them out in one hit. Between the one hit and the fire damage from the fire charm, I was able to take them out really easily. So as long as I swung before they got to me, then I was all set. So yeah, there's that. Okay, so yeah, that's all I have to say about. Oh wait, no, the other thing was the thing that also had made me hit a wall for a little bit was I ran into. This was before facing the Dried King. There are like these witch things that do similar attacks where they do the fireballs out in front of them. And I don't remember what they're called, but they were killing me constantly. And it took me a while to just finally be like, okay, I just need to roll behind them and then attack them. But I was just getting so irritated that I ended up, playing something else for a little bit. All right, just a second. All right, so I guess now I'll go ahead and talk about Death Stranding 2. So, of course, there was that update that improved performance on the Steam Deck, so I had to reinstall it on the Steam Deck and see if it was actually good enough to be playable. And I just happened to, earlier in the day, during my lunch break that day, I had been playing on my laptop at work, and so I had just gotten to an area that's like visually really pretty. It's like lots of lights and shadows and everything else. Like this would be a true test of what the Steam Deck could do. And so I installed it when I got home, and I figured, okay, I'm going to record this on the Steam Deck, the laptop, and then the desktop. Just do this section 3 times. It's basically going to a boss fight. Or like an area leading up to a boss fight, and since it's a pretty short area, I ended up just going through the boss fight, or as much as I could with all 3. So the Steam Deck performance is still not good. It is better than it was, for sure, especially for an area that's probably quite a bit more demanding, but it still was like 25 to 30 frames per second, which is just not good enough. It's not something to where I could say, oh, okay, that's playable. Like if I could get if 30 was the minimum, and like it would fluctuate between 30 and 40, I could deal with that more. But the problem is when it's dropping into the 20s, that's not good enough. I mean, like if it was 29, it would be one thing, but when it's dropping to like 24, 22, whatever, that's just not good enough. So, so yeah, I ended up uninstalling it after I did this attempt at the boss fight. But the footage that's playing here has side by side between the Steam Deck, the laptop, and the desktop for this boss fight, and you'll definitely notice a big difference here. I mean, of course, the Steam Deck, obviously, it looks the most blurry. it's the lowest frame rate. The laptop looks a lot better, runs basically above 60 all the time. I mean, it's just like much better. But you know, the lights and darks are not quite as drastic as they are on the desktop, where you have HDR and everything else. And so it's just like the visual difference between the three is pretty significant. And of course, on the desktop, it's also running basically almost always above 100 frames per second. Like, I think the lowest I ever saw it drop down to in this fight was like 99. So still really good. Looks and runs amazing. And the fight was cool too. I mean, it was very similar to one that they had on the first game, but there were some aspects of it that were different enough to where it didn't feel like it was exactly the same fight. And still, I mean, it was a cool fight in the first game, so this one is even, I mean, just as cool. But yeah, so I've had a good time with that. I've just gotten, let's see here, I can't remember where I left off last week, but I'm either into or just finished episode 6. I can't remember which it is. I didn't play quite as much as I would have liked to, because it was basically like I played, I don't know, just a little bit here and there. The week was just kind of different, and so I didn't get quite as much game time. And then I got sidetracked by another game that I'll talk about here in a little bit. But yeah, Death Stranding 2 is still incredible. I still thoroughly enjoy it. And the only reason I haven't played it more is just because of the fact that I felt like with Salt and Sanctuary being a shorter game, I probably should kind of focus a bit more on that one and just get through it, and then focus more on Death Stranding, since I know it's going to be something that takes me longer. I do know with Death Stranding 2, I'm going to be focusing mostly on the story initially. I'm not going to focus on trying to get all the achievements before I roll credits, because I just don't think that's necessary, especially considering the fact that I know from, you know, how things worked out in the last game that I will be more antsy to get the story done. And it's a lot easier to just enjoy all the side stuff that can take quite a bit longer and is a lot more grindy if I do it after I complete the story. So, yeah, not much else to say about that. But the one thing that really ended up being completely unplanned and just spur of the moment decision was we got information showing that while the third Jak and Daxter game got a PC decompilation. So as a result, it's possible to play all 3 Jak and Daxter games natively on PC. And so I went ahead and installed the 3 of them. I got them decompiled and recompiled on Steam Deck. And I've only played the first one because I, you know, never played these games other than a tiny bit that I played the first one on Vita. But yeah, runs like a dream. Locked 90 frames per second. Looks great. Unfortunately, it doesn't support HDR or anything, but it does have, you know, PC settings. You can adjust the resolution and frame rate and all that. At least the first 2 games, I know you can do the 90 frames per second. I think the third one currently can only do 60, but you know, that's still really good. So, yeah, it's a fun game. It's a good 3D platformer from the PS2 generation, and I've been having I have had a lot of fun with what I played. I probably played like 3-4 hours total of the game so far, and really have enjoyed what I played. I don't know what all there is to say about that, except the fact that this is Naughty Dog before they started doing Uncharted. And don't get me wrong, like, I like the Uncharted games a lot, but once I started doing Uncharted, then they also started doing The Last of Us, and then that's all they're doing is those extremely cinematic games instead of games that are actually like solid, fun games. You know, Uncharted games were good. I think those were very good, and I enjoyed those a lot. But aside from Uncharted, I mean, The Last of Us, it's such a different style of game because it's so serious, takes itself so seriously. And I mean, of course, before that you had Jak and Daxter and Crash Bandicoot, which of course don't take themselves seriously at all. So just a very different experience from that standpoint. But yeah, I've really enjoyed what I played of Jak and Daxter. And of course, like I said, it runs beautifully, and it is a native PC version because of the decompilation and recompilation. And love to see it. More and more of these things are coming up. I mean, not only do we have like 7 or 8 different N64 games and a GameCube game, and I didn't realize this, but they've been working on a Pikmin decompilation for a while. It was already almost done like 9 months ago, but when I checked the page, it didn't look like it was actually complete. So I don't know what's up with that. But of course, then there's Twilight Princess that's in progress and made a lot of progress and probably will be ready to go soon. So lots of good stuff. And because of the fact that these things don't provide the actual games, aren't distributing the games themselves, they're just providing the tool that makes it possible to take the ROMs, the ISOs, decompile and recompile them into native PC versions. Nintendo can't do anything about it any more than they can about most of the emulators. They only were able to do the Switch emulators because the group that was distributing the emulator was also providing links to ROM sites, which, that's a big problem. And of course, the fact that the Switch was their current console. So that didn't help things. But these are all old games. And I mean, if Nintendo doesn't want to sell us the games, then okay, that's their choice. If PlayStation doesn't want to sell us these games, okay, that's their choice. I mean, I own Jak and Daxter. I have the trilogy. I got it digitally on Vita, and I have the physical on PS3. So I own these games, and so as far as I'm concerned, it's like, hey, I'm going to play them, and I'm going to enjoy them on PC. Because they are good, fun 3D platformers, collectathons, and all that good stuff. So yeah, that's everything.
Yeah, going off of what you're saying, it's really just that whole fine, I'll do it myself mentality where these publishers, these game developers are not putting the games on PC. And we have said we will buy these games if you put them on PC.
Yep. I still would.
And the fact that, I mean, you've been sending me the different decomps that have been coming out. I'm thinking to myself, that we're getting them on a regular basis at this point, where it's like, how are these companies not seeing that these games are being made, they're being decompiled for PC, and we're having PC ports made, and they could have been doing this the entire time and actually been making money off of it rather than, people doing it just for the love of these games, and doing it for free, obviously. So it's really just mind-blowing how they're not catching on and just making a profit off of this themselves,
right?
When they could be. But I'm definitely glad to see it. I still have to go ahead and get those games decompiled and set up on my PC and Steam Deck as well. But I definitely look forward to getting into Jak and Daxter. I played a little bit of Jak and Daxter a long while ago, and I know I definitely played some of the games originally on my cousin's PS2 back in the day. But that's pretty much been the extent of those games. But I have wanted to get into it, and that's like one of the games which I definitely would have said, this is something I would go and buy a PS2 for, because this is a unique game that you can't get anywhere else. So yeah, I definitely look forward to getting to that. Regarding the Steam Deck settings, or rather regarding Death Stranding 2 for the Steam Deck, were you still using the same settings you had before, or did you adjust anything, or even like try like FSR?
Yeah, I was using the upscaler that they have by default, Pico. which is, I believe it's the one internal to whatever the engine is, Decima engine.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, I'm glad that you're getting overall better performance in in your hardware, like on your laptop, and then also I would assume on your desktop as well. But it's just a bit of a shame that the Steam Deck, which they said was going to be improved, didn't really seem to get much of a performance boost. Although, to your knowledge, since I know you said that that particular area you tested was a more demanding section, did it seem like any other areas that weren't as tense
I didn't test any other areas
busy?
because when I brought up my save, it was in this episode, which basically takes you to an area completely separate from everything else, and then you have to actually clear it in order to get outside. And I didn't clear it on the Steam Deck because it just was, well, for one, I didn't quite figure out some of the gimmicks of the fight, but also because of the fact that the frame rate just wasn't good enough.
Understandable. Regarding Salt and Sanctuary, I'm definitely glad you made a lot of progress there for what time you put in there. And I'm glad that you were able to get past some of those hurdles with the strike versus slash. Something you mentioned, because I forgot, or at least I guess I was too stubborn to like worry about, hey, are you resistant or not to this? But and because of that, I didn't even know about Mal's high holy attacks, and then of course using the shield. You said you are currently at level 4 for your great shields.
No, I'm saying that that's the level of the great shield that they suggested using that would block all holy damage.
Okay.
I think now, as of this moment, I'm up to like level 3 great shields.
Okay. Okay, cool. In that case, there is one more level 4 great shield, which I possibly recommend if this boss gives you as much of a hard time as she gave for me, and that is the shield called the Ashen Great Shield. This is, I can't remember what the area is called, but it is for a boss known as the Witch of the Lake, and that shield gives you 100% protection from arcane magic, which is going to be very necessary if you decide you want to actually block her attacks and not take them on or try to dodge them. But yeah, that's something I want to recommend. And then also, just also letting you know ahead of time, there will be enemies, and you might even have encountered a couple of them already, which are these hangmen. They just float around, and if you do not kill them in time, essentially there is a reticle that appears above you, and after a certain amount of time passes, you will take the place of the hangmen and take damage.
I've come across a couple of those.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I was able to take them out pretty quickly, but they did hang me a couple times.
Yeah, because I've been stun I've been stun locked so many different times because there were probably about 4 or 5 of them, and then as soon as I was hung by one, another one immediately hung me, and it kept going until I was dead. So yeah, I definitely was not fond of them at all.
Yeah.
But okay, yeah, it was just like a couple things I just wanted to let you know ahead of time. But yeah, good stuff.
All right, sounds good. Well, since we were already talking about Steam Deck performance and all of that, I think that's a good segue into our first topic for this evening, and that is regarding the Steam frame rate estimates that are coming. So essentially, now correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I don't have the story in front of me, but actually, I'll just bring it up. 1 second here, because I had read it earlier, and I've watched numerous videos on this. Want to make sure I get my information correct. All right, so So the thing that has been found within Steam database, SteamDB, is that Steam will soon tell you how much FPS you may get according to your PC specs by taking other Steam users with similar hardware into consideration. So, essentially, it just looks at. I mean, I would assume it's basically if you provide your access for Steam to be able to see what hardware you have and everything. When you look at a game on the Steam store, you'll see it'll say, okay, based on your hardware, this users with similar hardware have gotten this performance. So this could be a way to show not only situation. I mean, like if you have this could be definitely for Steam Deck would be a big one. But even for other things, it's a way to show you whether or not a game will perform well enough to be worth your money, essentially. I have a lot of thoughts about this. Whether or not they'll be as wordy as usual, we'll see. But what are yours?
Yeah, I think it definitely it's definitely interesting, I would say, the least, because Valve has been, I guess, slowly setting this up. I know that at one point, and I mean, they have, probably this was a year or so ago, I think that's when they started, at least for the Steam Deck. I don't remember if this was for the PC. If they, would ask you for games, will you allow us to collect information to see, how the game is run? Or not necessarily that, but something regarding that, which I think has been leading up to this point. And then even earlier this year, they had a beta for, or at least people who were in the Steam or Steam beta, where you can, when you post a review for a game on the Steam page, you can also share your specs as well, so people can see, what hardware you're using while you're playing the game. So I think that all of this, and now with this step as well, it's really something that Valve has just been building up towards, so that way people can know, hey, here's how well the game runs on my hardware, and here's the performance I'm getting, which I think is pretty nice. So that way, and like you said, especially for the Steam Deck, since that is, it's going to be the same hardware across the board. So if someone else has a Steam Deck, they're going to get the same performance. I mean, of course, if you have an OLED versus an LCD, you won't have that 60 hertz limit that you would have, versus the 90 hertz refresh rate. So there's that one difference there. But other than that, the hardware itself is essentially the same. So it is good to know what performance you're getting, especially, I think, if a game is so-called verified for the Steam Deck, and yet the performance doesn't necessarily reflect that, then I think that's definitely good to know. And even on on desktop, I think obviously it's going to be a whole lot harder to say one way or another, just because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of combinations you can have for PC hardware. And I think even to a degree, I will probably even say to a greater degree that this would help would be for people who might be on a gaming laptop or something like that, because the hardware for desktop isn't necessarily one-to-one. So if a game says that the minimum specs are, say, an RTX 2060, well, that's going to be a bit different on a mobile version. So if you can get the hardware specs, for someone who's been playing on a mobile, on a laptop, it'll be nice to see, hey, for people who have similar hardware, what performance will I actually get? So that's definitely beneficial. One thing that would be kind of cool, I would be wondering, is if you could also have that tie into the same reviews that you have for Steam games, where people can share their hardware and also share their average frame rate. That's something that I think would be great to know, so that way, hey, you have this hardware, what's the frame rate you're getting here as well. Now, I think another thing, because the article didn't say, I believe, yeah, it didn't really say anything about it at all. But I think a couple things that would be useful to know, though, would be what were the settings that were used, because that could definitely drastically change if, if performance is better, because someone's playing at a higher resolution or lower resolution than I would, that would impact the frame rate, or, if they were using higher or lower or even just medium settings, that would also impact the frame rate as well. So I think that's something that would be nice to also know as well, just to help out, just to give users more information on what they're having there. But also, I think what would be nice to know is if they're using frame gen or not, because if you're saying, hey, I'm getting 200 frames per second on this game, and it's like, okay, that sounds pretty good, and I play the game like, I am getting nowhere near that. What in the world is going on here? 24
frames per second.
And it's like, oh, you were using frame gen the whole time. That explains it. Like, that's something that I would wonder if Valve is going to also add that information, or if they're just going to somehow figure out the raw, actual natural frame rate is. If they're able to do that, then I think providing that information would be better, because I don't think we need to know if you're using frame gen or not. I think it's better to know what the natural frame rate is. So rather than that, because that's not everyone's going to want or use frame gen. So I think just getting the base numbers is better. I mean, granted, I believe that if you're using Valve's overlay for the frame rate, even if you're using frame generation, it still can actually show you the normal frame rate you're getting, the actual frame rate you're getting. So I think if they are doing that same thing, they probably will show you what that would be. So I think that's definitely possible to just cut out the frame gen and just show you, hey, here's the actual numbers that are present. But yeah, so I mean, I think this is interesting. I think this would, I don't see the harm in this. I mean, I think this is definitely beneficial for consumers, so that way they can see, hey, here's what I'm getting and here's what performance I'll get, or even, hey, if I'm upgrading to a newer PC or getting, a few improvements here or there, what performance could I be getting in the future? Now, granted, if it's only showing you what you currently have, you won't necessarily know until later, but if someone happens to have it, like I said, if you could see that frame rate in reviews, then that would be a good sign to show you what you could be getting later on. But yeah, I think this is pretty good. I have no problems with this at all, and I think it's great.
Yeah, I'm very I can't talk. I'm very positive about this. Like, I think that this is a very good thing, especially for people who have more standardized hardware. Obviously the Steam Deck being a big thing, because as you pointed out, games that are verified sometimes shouldn't be verified, even if they're getting a consistent 30 frames per second. Even if there's the verification minimum is consistent 30 frames per second or locked, whatever. Some of the games end up having significant frame drops at times, or like they'll be good early on in the game and then the frame rate just tanks. Like, I remember Horizon Forbidden West, when I started off the game, I mean, it was Steam Deck actually, no, maybe it wasn't actually verified. I think that one might have been unsupported. But anyway, so I just remember, seeing the initial gameplay that someone was getting like 30 frames per second. When I started it up and I was playing on Steam Deck, I was getting 30 frames per second in the opening area. But after that, it was just extremely inconsistent on the frame rate, and it was not worth playing there, which was unfortunate because I was really excited to be able to play it on the Steam Deck, and I would have been fine with 30 frames for just when I'm playing, away from home or whatever. Just exploring here and there, not having to do a whole lot with combat. I can live with 30. But yeah, having the ability to see by default, okay, this is what performance looks like with on this hardware, that's really helpful. And definitely the number one thing I would want is for it to be, this is the raw performance, not with frame generation, because frame generation, that's just deceitful, because it's not really giving you what you want. And some people, they think frame gen is great. I personally think it's garbage, because it's not real performance. Your actions are not happening any more quickly. It's just making you think that they are. And then when you actually play it, it feels worse than it does just having, this is the actual amount of, input lag and all that. So having that. The other thing is that the one thing that I could see being more of a difficulty with this is, of course, because people do mess around with settings, whether or not you'd be able to actually see, okay, this is, this frame rate is based on these settings. Now, I guess really what it would need to be is, let's look at the average, what people are getting on average across the board without including frame gen. Like, if frame gen is part of the package, it doesn't count. If someone's using lossless scaling, it doesn't count, because that's a layer on top. We're talking about just raw performance. This is what the game can do, regardless of what the settings are. And then from there, at least people can see, okay, this is the range I can expect, regardless of what the settings are that are required to get that. And most PC gamers that don't have the console mindset know that sometimes you have to tweak settings a little bit more than others. And if you don't feel like tweaking settings, a lot of times you can just look online and find someone who has already figured out how to get this optimized properly. And that's oftentimes just the way to go about it. But I could see this also being helpful for like laptops, because you're going to have more standardized hardware with laptops, at least with the exception of times when people have actually gone in and customized what goes into the laptop, which I know at least you used to be able to do that. I would imagine you still can, but I haven't bought a new laptop from one of the official websites in 16 years. So I don't remember. I mean, I don't know if it's still the same. I would assume it is, but I would imagine that like people with a 4060 laptop, for example, like what I have, are probably in general going to have pretty similar specs on those, at least with the Legion Go, or the Legion, whatever they're called. I don't know, the Lenovo Legion laptops. So it's probably going to have some standardization there to where you can at least get a good idea. And I think that it's just something that can be really helpful when it comes to buying games, because if you see the game has absolute trash performance on average, then it might tell you, okay, this isn't going to be worth getting. On the other hand, if the developer has actually properly optimized and you can see that, oh, this game has great performance, this game has 60 plus, 100 plus frames per second or even greater, then it's like, hey, I'm gonna thoroughly enjoy this. The one thing that I would like to see with that, and maybe this wouldn't be something initially with bringing this in, is that when they display that average, then it would be good if they had a way to show based on the resolution, like have different levels, like say this is the average across the board, and then say if you go, and then like maybe you mouse over it or you click and then it drops down and says, okay, people playing at 4K versus 1440p versus 1080p versus 720p and so on. That could be helpful. Something along those lines, just to kind of give a better idea, because even though, like especially people on console really want 4K, and there definitely are people on PC who also want 4K as well, but there's plenty of us, there's a lot of people playing on PC who are playing at 1080p. Like you and I know are playing at 1440, but like obviously if I'm playing on Steam Deck, I'm playing at typically 720p because then it's 16:9 aspect ratio and all that, and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's just like getting that resolution in particular. That's going to be really helpful to see, especially if you're just looking at the native people playing it native, or using DLSS or what have you. So I think that this could be really good, but it could also be good from the standpoint of it can definitely give some more accountability to developers. Because if they're poorly optimizing their games, then there's going to be that tag right there on the Steam page that shows that it's poorly optimized. And I mean, of course, obviously people rating it will also help with that, but some people have lower standards than others, and some people are okay with playing at 20 frames per second. Which, unless you're running on a really old computer, I hope you're not okay with 20 frames per second. But if a modern game is running at 20 frames per second, that's garbage optimization, and you should not be praising that. Oh, but it's 240 if I use 6 times frame generation. That's not good. So, yeah, I think that's everything I have to say.
Since you had mentioned it, I didn't think about this, but I wonder if they'll be able to find a way to distinguish, regular resolution versus upscaled resolution. Like if someone's using DLSS or FSR or anything like that, because that I think that would definitely possibly skew results similar to using frame gen.
Yeah.
So I think that would be also important to know, like how that would work as well.
Yeah, I would think that it would be nice if they, even if they just said upscaled versus non-upscaled. Like they don't have to specify which upscaler gets used, as long as they specify this is upscaled and then this is native. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. And I didn't even think about it also, but you make a good point about this would also keep developers accountable for optimization, because if people are saying, hey, this game's not optimized, and the developer says, yeah, well, it can run well, and it's like, okay, I'm not asking you to get it to run on a GTX 1063 gigabyte card. I'm using an RTX 3070. That's a very capable GPU still. There's no reason why I should only be getting 30 frames per second on here. Like that doesn't make sense at all. So I definitely agree that it would definitely help keep them accountable and show that, hey, the developers are not doing what they should be doing to get the game to run properly. Like I shouldn't have to get two 5090s, one for to run the game and the other to use DLSS 5 just to get the game to run at 60 frames per second. It should not be like that. So I agree wholeheartedly that it'll definitely, hopefully light a fire under the devs to keep them to make sure they're doing what they should be doing.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess let's go ahead and move on into the next topic. So I'll let you pick which one you want to cover next of our list.
All right. I guess we can go into The Last of Us. I guess we can go into that one. All right. So, it was revealed. Of course, we've talked in the past about how there was a Last of Us Online that was going to be a part of Last of Us Part 2 remastered or remake. I can't remember.
It was just supposed to be part of the original game.
Oh, part of the original game. And how that was eventually canceled. But, well, it turns out that the game, that the feature Last of Us Online was canceled a day before it was Oh no, wait. Oh, never mind. You know what? I'm getting this mixed up with the other with the co-op feature. So never mind. There was an actual Last of Us Online project. Oh, never mind. This was Factions. Never mind. I keep thinking it's two different things for some reason. But Last of Us Online, which was going to be known as Factions, was canceled in 2023. It turns out that the game was 80% complete, and it was just canceled a day before it was revealed. Now, this had been 7 years into development, and it was apparently going very well. It was close to being completed, but for whatever reason, and this of course was a part of Sony canceling certain projects here and there. They decided to pull the plug on it, and they just dropped it. And of course, they also had other studios reduce their projects as well. And this, oops, let me. I know that whoops, where's it here that just had that pulled up? Yeah, so in an interview on the Lance E. Lee podcast, the Last of Us Online director Vinit Agarwal talked about it some, and he said that the game was doing very well internally, and that the team that was 8% completed and was close to being done, but it was just canceled. And he said that the studio did have to make a decision whether they wanted to go ahead with The Last of Us Online or to make the next game, which Neil Druckmann was going to be directing. And they decided to go ahead and work with the latter. And he said that the team was devastated over this and that they really didn't want to have to cancel it. And I believe that the game, it wasn't, I think, officially stated, but I think the game is the what's the name of the current game that Naughty Dog is working on? That futuristic game. Yeah, that. So that was the game that they ended up working on. So it is interesting that Factions was canceled just before it was going to be worked on, or canceled right before it was going to be revealed. I definitely have a few things to mention about this, but what are your thoughts on this cancellation?
Well, I mean, there's, I made it clear what I think about The Last of Us Part 2 in general. Like I was never interested in it even before we found out about all the story stuff. Just because even though the first game was good, the story was good, it just wasn't my style of game. Like I played all the way through it. I beat the game. That is, I played the remaster on PS4, the original remaster. And I liked it, but it was just so tense that I didn't like the gameplay. It was not my type of game. So I wasn't that interested in Last of Us Part 2 to begin with. Then, of course, we heard about everything that happened with the story, and then my interest went to zero, or negative. But the thing about Factions, even though I'm not into multiplayer games, I know quite a few people who were really excited about it because they loved the multiplayer in the original Last of Us. And the fact that, this was promised as, okay, I mean, because it wasn't there at launch with The Last of Us Part 2, but they said, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And then 3 years later, they cancel it and say, we just decided that we couldn't manage doing an online game in addition to, working on our single player stuff and all this and so on and so forth. We didn't really know all the reasons behind it. Supposedly, some of it had to do with Bungie basically saying, oh, this game's not ready, it's not going to do well, so on and so forth. But hearing that they canceled it 24 hours before it was supposed to be revealed, when it was 80% complete, just so that they could do Intergalactic. It's like, oof. And especially because I think that this actually would have been a really successful online game. I mean, The Last of Us fans are hardcore. And, well, I should say, most of them, the sane ones are. The other ones are just virtue signaling because it's a pretty looking game. That's, on PlayStation. But the reality is that, like, this is something that should not have been canceled. And I'm not just, like, dogging on Sony. I kind of understand in one sense why they made the decision, but at the same time, this just seems like this would have been a really easy moneymaker. Like, they could have had this going, and they would have been able to very easily monetize their users. Microtransactions galore. They could have had a bunch of skins and additional weapons and so on and so forth. I mean, they could have done a whole lot of different stuff to make this game something that everybody loved and that had a lot of staying power. And I really think it would have, because I believe that the multiplayer on the original Last of Us stuck around for quite a while before they stopped supporting it, and that people, had a dedicated fan base. And I don't know. I don't understand why they felt the need to cancel this. But of course, they also canceled the online, the Spider-Man multiplayer game. That also didn't make sense to me why they canceled it. It's like, that was another one that would have actually done really well, especially when you have the multiverse, so you have all these different versions of Spider-Man that people can play as. It seems like that was a no-brainer. Like, that would have been an easy moneymaker. And I mean, I guess at the same time, they probably would have had to give a lot of money to Marvel because of, all the royalties associated with that. So that may have been part of their motivation on that end. But still, it's just, some of these things just don't make sense to me. And this isn't me saying Sony's bad. I mean, I think all corporations are greedy, and it doesn't matter which one you have. It's just some of them, at the same time as being greedy, also have figured out ways that they can make more money by doing things that the customer actually likes. Like Valve is what they do more. But I don't know. I'm not sure I really have anything else to say on the matter. I think this is dumb, and it just seems like these corporations in general, not just PlayStation, but a lot of these corporations, Xbox has done a lot of stupid things, Nintendo's done a lot of stupid things. Yeah. I think in general they've done some stupid things, but this one was just, I can't understand why they didn't even give it a try, and yet they put all that money into Concord, and that thing died after 2 weeks. It's like, this one would have had a lot more staying power than Concord. Guaranteed. And yet they shut it down. But, of course, they have to do more of a cinematic, first-person story game, or not first-person, third-person, over-the-shoulder action-adventure with stealth elements. Yeah, okay. That's it. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I agree that this is a game that I don't know why they didn't go ahead and commit to this, because it was almost done. They were at the finish line, and like you said, with factions in the original Last of Us, people enjoyed that, and very much so that they were looking forward to this one as well. So it does make sense as to why they would cut support for it, especially since they were going through a whole initiative of, hey, we need to have more live service games. We need to, they were beating the drum over that repeatedly. And like you said, they let Concord go, and they shut that down pretty quickly. And I don't remember what the latest numbers are, but look at Marathon. Despite how many setbacks that game has had, and despite the fact that they've had PR troubles leading up to release, it hasn't it's not horrible, but it's not necessarily what I would call great, especially when you put the numbers up to, say, Helldivers 2. Like that, the Helldivers 2 blows Marathon out of the water as far as the numbers go, or at least on the Steam numbers. So I don't see why Sony didn't let Last of Us 2 Online keep going. I definitely agree that it would have done a whole lot better than... I think it would have done better than Concord. It would have done better than Marathon, even though it would have been just, only on PlayStation. I still think it would have done well enough. And like you said, they could have monetized their users and kept going on it. I mean, Sony has 2 different live service games for Horizon. So like it's not like they couldn't have gone ahead and, I mean, they could have just pulled the plug on one of those and said, hey, those resources will just, give that to Naughty Dog and let them finish up Last of Us. Which, I mean, also another thing is, if the game was almost done already, why force them to choose between Last of Us and the new game when it's like, all right, since you're almost done, finish up this, then you can work on your new game. Like, I don't think it had to have been an either or. It could have been a, go ahead and finish this up. We'll go ahead and have another team step in to continue with like maintenance and stuff, to update the servers, to go and add in updates and new content here and there. And you can go ahead and work on the single player game. You can do that, but just finish up Last of Us Factions and call it a day. So I think they could have done that instead. I don't see any reason why they needed to do that, other than Sony just is not the best at making good decisions, which is definitely a shame. And I will agree that canceling the Spider-Man live service game is probably not the best idea. They could have done that one, also could have done well, just because, like you said, having the different Spider-Verse stuff and, it would have been easy to go ahead and monetize that. But like you also said, they probably wouldn't have to worry about giving out different royalties to Marvel, especially if there were certain iterations that possibly would have had to have tied into other companies. They would have had to, possibly give money depending on which iteration they were going with. So that could have been a nightmare. I'll only say the good news for me is the fact that we don't have other iterations that are not Peter Parker showing up. So, you know what, that's my W there for me, at least, personal W. So, I'll hold that one. But as far as Last of Us goes, I just think that one was a missed opportunity altogether. And that one could have been the moneymaker, or at least a better moneymaker than what they expected Concord to be, or what Concord had been when that came out. So, actually, that one was PS exclusive, so that definitely would have done a whole lot better than Concord.
Yeah.
Which isn't something people probably even asked for to begin with. But yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
All right. Well, I think we'll skip one of the topics, but we'll just go into the last big one. And I don't know how much we'll actually have to say about this since we don't have much of any information, but supposedly the Steam Deck 2 is targeting a 2028 release. Let me just bring up the article here, see if there was, I can't remember if there was anything further on that. Just bring that up again. Okay, so this claim is coming from Kepler L2, who's been a reliable leaker in the past, posting on NeoGAF. He was asked whether it would be 2029 before we see the next iteration, and he responded saying that as far as he knows, Valve was targeting 2028. However, with the whole RAM and NAND situation, that could delay it. But he did explain a bit more that if they have to delay it, the plus side would be that since it's not built on a semi-custom SoC like the PS6 and Project Helix, it means the manufacturers could upgrade it as time goes on, and it could end up with better specs if it's delayed. So that's essentially all the information we have at the moment. But what are your thoughts on this?
I'm actually surprised. I mean, granted, it's been a while since the Steam Deck has come out, and some time has also passed since the OLED version has come out as well. And I know Valve has said that they wanted to wait for a reasonable, or what they deemed a reasonable, difference between the current model and the next model would be. So it's not something they were going to go and say, hey, give us another years and then we'll give you the next Steam Deck. So I didn't know what that would be, but I guess enough time has passed, or there are enough improvements in mobile hardware where they would say, okay, we are looking at making the next Steam Deck, which is definitely great. I think it's good, and because while the Steam Deck, I love the handheld, I think it's a great console, a great device. It definitely will struggle with certain titles. So having better hardware that can play newer games and more demanding games is great. Being able to play games at higher frame rates would also be great as well. So I think this is good news. I am a bit surprised. I mean, I don't know why I'm saying that, but I am surprised that 2028 is when it would come out. Still feels like it's a bit soon, all things considered. But hey, I would welcome that. I would definitely welcome that. And I mean, considering where we are right now currently with handheld, PCs, especially if you look at the Ally and Ally X, even if the Steam Deck 2 isn't using cutting edge hardware, which I think Valve probably won't do just to help save on costs. Even if the power level is akin to the regular Xbox Ally, but it's like,
I mean, the regular Xbox Ally isn't really isn't that much more powerful than the Steam Deck. It's pretty similar.
Oh, really? Oh, never mind.
I mean,
so
it might be a little bit more,
like
but
the X. So if we're getting something like the Xbox Ally X as far as power goes, and yet it's substantially cheaper than that, say roughly, you have the base model that is, I don't know, like $450, or $400, which was the original price for the LCD or the LCD lower end models. If it's something like that, then that's a pretty good price, and you're still getting better performance over the current models. So I mean, as time goes by, especially since they said they're going to be using different hardware, not possibly using like the SoC chips as well. So I mean, if they're able to do something like that and possibly upgrade stuff, then we might even get something that's even better than what the X is currently able to do. So it's definitely become interesting to wait and see. Now, of course, we will have to see what happens with the RAM crisis, and if the AI bubble bursts, and then how long, if it does burst, how long until things start to mellow out. I know that I've seen reports say that if the RAM crisis does end, say for example this year, it'll take at least another year or so before that trickles out into the actual markets themselves. So I mean, I think 2028 is feasible, but it is possible we could have to wait until 2029 for that. But I mean, I think that 2 to 3 years is fine to wait. I mean, definitely would allow me to save up between getting the Steam machine frame and an extra controller now, and then have the time to save up for the next Steam handheld as well down the road. But definitely looks pleasing, promising. I mean, since this is coming from Kepler, then I definitely have faith that this is true. But one thing I will also just quickly add is that I think Valve unintentionally playing the waiting game has paid off for them, because I mean, we've seen this with other gaming handhelds, primarily the ones that have had multiple iterations pop out like every year or so, and that has hurt them, where they've either had to jack up prices for their handhelds, or they've had to just completely cut handhelds altogether. Like Aya Neo, they stopped releasing, or they stopped production for 2 models, just because of the fact that, of course, the RAM crisis was a problem, but also it seems like every year or every 2 years they had a new model coming out, and that definitely would have hurt having to do that. And I know that can't remember if it's the Lenovo handhelds or another one, or it's probably the MSI one. That could be it, where the price has actually gone up for their handhelds as well. Yeah, so it's just insane to think about. So I mean, of course, Valve has stopped production for the LCD Steam Deck as a result of short RAM shortage, and the OLED has been out of stock multiple times, and as of right now, it probably still is out of stock. But I think if they had been in the mindset of, hey, let's make multiple units, they probably would have been in a similar situation where they either A, would have to just completely cut production for multiple units, or B, would have said, all right, I guess we're going to just raise the price of the Steam Deck, essentially. So I think having just one unit, or at least one series of units, was definitely a good thing, and just to, like, wait until the next iteration rather than just say, hey, we're going to just constantly pump out Steam Deck models.
Yeah.
So that I think unintentionally that helped them to wait rather than just to go and make new models because it's trendy. And of course, we're sort of starting to get a bit oversaturated in that market as well. So, people will only probably just be getting 1, maybe 2 handhelds, and that's about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's everything that I have to say on this.
All right. What's your wish list for the Steam Deck 2? What would you like to see with that?
As far as like a game title or like features?
No, features.
Okay.
We don't believe in exclusives here, remember?
As far as features go, I would... Oh, man. Because I feel like there's just so much that the Steam Deck does right that I'm really just trying to think, all right, what is the one thing that could be better? I mean, of course, now I haven't tried it yet, or haven't opened up mine yet, so I can't really necessarily say, but if they could make it easier, I mean, I don't know how easy it is because I haven't opened mine up. I'm just like, if it's really easy just to say, open up the Steam Deck and switch out the SSD, or even say have a dual SSD units. That way, hey, if I want to expand my storage but also don't want to have a slower micro SD card, I could just open it up, put in another SSD, and that way I could have faster storage, while still also be able to expand it as well. So I think that would actually be what my first primary wish is, to have just dual SSD slots. So that way it would be easier to, I could have like faster. And of course, I still wouldn't mind to have the micro SD slot, that's still more storage for me, especially for older games to play them on. But I would just like to have that another SSD in there. But I guess if I had to ask for something else, then I would probably say my other thing would be to possibly either have a 720p screen, just because I really prefer to have 16:9 over 16:10, which sure, some more games are supporting that aspect ratio, but I think I would just prefer to have a natural 16:9 aspect ratio, or possibly have of course not every game would obviously take advantage of this, but if it had a 120 hertz screen, that would be nice for the games that could get 120 frames per second. That would definitely be cool. And I think, of course, with the more powerful hardware, we would see more games be able to do that, especially since we do have a lot of games already hitting 90 frames per second. That would be great. I think OLED at launch would be great. Not having to necessarily wait for a period of time and then say, hey, here's our OLED available right now, and whatnot. But I think those would really be the things that I can think of that I would like to see. Like I said, I really like what Valve has done with the Steam Deck, so it's like really hard for me to say, oh, how could you improve this further, when there's just like a whole lot that has gone into the device already. But yeah, I think those were things off the top of my head that I can think of.
All right. Well, as far as this whole thing goes, I mean, for one, I do believe that they probably are targeting 2028. Whether or not it'll actually come out that soon will obviously just depend a lot on the RAM crisis and all of that. But I think 2028 is a good time frame to bring it out, if they're able to pull that off. That's 5 years after the Steam Deck OLED came out. And so that's, a good time frame, a good gap of time to where I don't feel like it's so soon. Because, going from the LCD to the OLED, that was a pretty short gap. And while obviously a lot of people didn't actually make the upgrade, you and I did. And I mean, I don't have any regrets having made that upgrade. Like, it was totally worth it. It's been great. I love my Steam Deck OLED. But yeah, 2028 I think is a good amount of time, because that's a nice gap of time. And if prices actually level out by that point, they could have something that's on par power-wise with the Ally X, or maybe even more powerful, like Lenovo Legion Go 2 would be amazing, because that thing's really powerful. But of course it's $2,000 because they increased the price from I think it was like $1,300 or something like that before, and it's gone up dramatically. But I mean, power is not the biggest thing. It's really just for the games that just don't run well on it. And like, I don't expect it to be so dramatically more powerful that it's going to be running every new game, perfectly, but more power certainly wouldn't hurt. And so like, I'm all for it, I'm not getting rid of my OLED though, regardless of what kind of screen the new one has, which hopefully it will be an OLED screen. To me, that's like, you need to just stick with the OLED, because everybody loves the OLED. It's so much better. And I mean, unless you're going to do the LCD and the OLED at the same time, then you just need to do the OLED. Just straight up do the OLED. We're good to go. But if they do want to do it both at the same time, that's fine too. Have the LCDs be cheaper. But I also just, for me, like, I don't need it to be dramatically different. Otherwise, I'm fine with. I don't think it needs to have a 1080p screen. In fact, I don't think it should. Because they can still, I mean, I think that if they're going to do anything, like you said, they should just bump up the refresh rate to 120. Because then they could maintain the 720p, 800p, whatever. You know, they probably would go up to 1080 and just make it a nicer screen, because it's probably going to be a nicer screen than what you get on the Switch 2 anyway, because Valve doesn't cheap out in the same way that Nintendo did. At least just, you know, based on what we've seen so far from their hardware. But beyond that, I don't know, you know, give me something that's like twice as powerful and I'm happy. If it's going to be a Steam Deck 2, it should be twice as powerful at least. If it can be even more powerful than that, that would be great. I don't expect it to be on the same levels like the Steam Machine, because that's, you know, significantly larger piece of hardware. You know, I don't expect it to be 6 times more powerful than the Steam Deck, but as long as it's enough of a significant boost to where you can start running games that don't do well on the Steam Deck, even if it's just, you know, games from a few years ago or whatever, that's good. Now, if we found out that it was, if for some strange reason they're like, oh, Steam Deck 2 is exactly as powerful as the Steam Deck 1, except that it now has a higher resolution screen and higher hertz rate. No, that's something Nintendo would do. But no, Nintendo didn't even do that with the Switch 2. But there's not a whole lot that would make me say I'm not going to buy this. And, well, it's price. Price is really the one thing. If it's about the same price as the Steam Deck or the Steam Deck OLED, then I'm in. If it's $1,000, I'm not spending that. That's too much for a handheld. And, you know, I'm perfectly content continuing to just play the games I have that are playable on my Steam Deck. You know, and then streaming the ones that are not playable on the Steam Deck. Or playing them on my laptop. You know, it's like there are other options. But regardless of how long it takes for the Steam Deck 2 to come out, I don't have a shortage of games to play. I'm not going to run out of games anytime soon. In fact, I don't know that I'll ever run out of games. It's just an ever-expanding library that never shrinks. It just grows. And so, no matter when this comes, it's not going to make a big difference from that standpoint. But I do intend to probably buy the Steam Deck 2 whenever it comes, assuming the price is right. And, you know, I intend to use it. And then I intend to still use my Steam Deck OLED for other things. Or at least not get rid of it. It may just be like a secondary device that other people use, or, you know, my wife or my kids use. Maybe eventually by the time my kids are much older, you know, it goes to the 4th kid or whatever, you know, just either way, I think this is good news. And, you know, 2028, 2029, and even if it's 2030, that's fine. And I didn't even intend for that to rhyme. But yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say. It's late. I'm getting tired. So
okay. Just out of curiosity though, did you have any like wish list ideas for Switch?
Really, just that it has the OLED screen, or at least has that as an option at launch. That's really the big thing for me. I know that the SSD is pretty easy to swap out already. I definitely see, you know, the idea of having an extra slot for an SSD would be cool. But if that's going to make the cost go up too much, then I wouldn't be as interested in that. Because, of course, right now, obviously, storage is very expensive as well. And until that goes down in price, then it won't really matter. But I guess something that would be kind of nice is, assuming the prices go down enough by this point, which I don't think they would even release it if prices haven't gone down. Having 2 terabytes would be pretty nifty. You know, just having that extra storage, but also maintaining the micro SD slot would be good. Just continuing to have that freedom. That's the big thing. You know, it's funny to me. Like I had discussions. I had some discussions with friends who are console players, and you know, I tell them the things that Valve could potentially do that I don't expect them to do. But it's like, okay, you know, Valve could do this because they do have a history of being more pro-consumer in their approach. And despite what Reforge Gaming says, pro-consumer doesn't mean that they don't care about profit. It just means that they know that if they do things that benefit the consumer, guess what? They also make a lot more money. I mean, what a concept. But Valve is a company that has continuously done that, because when they haven't done that, when they've done things that are anti-consumer, that, you know, benefit them but not the customer, the customers have fought back. And that's the reason why, you know, Valve keeps saying that basically the customer, they're our bosses, and we have to do things that benefit them if we want to maintain their loyalty and earn their money. And so, as I think personally, that while I do not expect Valve to do anything like taking a chance on selling the Steam machine for a cheaper price with the idea that maybe prices will go down, I also wouldn't be surprised if they did it, just because of the history of this company. I don't expect them to do it. I have zero expectations. Well, at least zero positive expectations. I just assume corporation is going to be greedy regardless. But Valve has proven me wrong enough times to where I'm like, if they did something that was more pro-consumer like that, and released the Steam machine, Steam frame, and a controller and a bundle, and, you know, it was less expensive than it would cost, than you would expect it to cost, or less expensive than the console manufacturers would charge, it wouldn't surprise me in the least. And I would be laughing. And then I would go spend my money on them. But I don't expect them to actually do something as crazy as being like, oh, we're going to give you the Steam frame, the Steam machine, and Steam controller in a bundle for $1,500. I mean, theoretically, that should be doable from a financial standpoint, especially because you can, with the right, searching through the right sources and everything, you could actually probably build a PC that's similar to a Steam machine for around $800, $700 to $800, even now. But the reality is, like, I don't expect that, because I don't, even Valve, I don't expect that from. But getting back to the main point I was trying to make here, is that people who are on the console side and have been on the console side are so used to getting screwed by these corporations that they've gotten to a point where they feel like they have to defend it. And so, some of them will call it out, but a lot of them will just kind of like, they're like, oh, this is just the way things are. And so they don't believe it's even possible that there could possibly be a company like Valve that actually does things that are pro-consumer, that, you know, of course, still earn them a bunch of money. And I mean, there's a reason why Valve is the #1 PC marketplace. It's because Valve does things that benefit the consumer, and so they have loyal customers who want to spend their money there because it's been beneficial. It's like, you know, they do things that are favorable to the consumer, so the consumer spends more money. What a concept. So, I don't even remember what got me on that tangent, but regardless, I don't expect anything out of Valve, but I wouldn't put it past them to do something pro-consumer. Again. All right. Any other thoughts before we close out for the night?
No, sir.
All right. Let's get into our recommendations and dissuasions. Why don't you start us off?
All right. So my recommendations have several different recommendations, actually. The first one is for Portrait of Ruin, and that is to use the Nebula Whip, and that is if you are primarily using a whip weapon. That has a special ability where it will sort of seek out enemies, so it helps it with not having to necessarily aim or make sure that you are lining up your attacks. So it definitely helps a whole lot there. And up until I got Vampire Killer, I had been using that primarily, even if it was a little weaker than other whips, just because it has that sort of like seeking aspect to it. Next one is going to be, if you really like DRM-free games and if you really like first-person shooters, I recommend buying Doom Eternal on GOG. They dropped that game on there, and I don't know if it'll still be on sale by the time the episode goes live, but it's currently on sale for $10, so hey, go ahead and get that. I already picked it up.
Yeah.
In fact, I even got an email and got it for, I think, $8. So hey.
Nice.
So yeah, definitely go get it there. And you'll even have to like log into Bethesda or whatever the online services. It just takes you directly into the game itself. So that's something else that they managed to cut out there as well. So
very nice.
Go get it if you like the game. And the next thing I'll also say, also related to GOG, is to vote for games you will love to see brought over and preserved. There have been games that have been voted for, like Final Fantasy VII, and I think the Resident Evil games as well that were brought over to GOG. So yeah, if there's a game you want to see brought over, go and vote for it. And then GOG will go ahead and do what they have to do, if they can, to get the game not only brought over to the storefront where it's completely DRM free, but preserved, so that way you can play the game on future hardware, not have to worry about if the game is compatible or not. So yeah, those are my recommendations.
Very nice. Yep. Agree wholeheartedly, especially on Doom Eternal. That is fantastic game. I mean, both 2016 and Eternal are fantastic games, but yeah. Very, very nice. And they are extremely well optimized on PC to where you can even get pretty close to a lock 60 frames per second on Eternal on the Steam Deck. With good visuals and everything else, so well worth playing there. But yeah, okay. My recommendations. First of all, because I didn't write this down and I want to make sure I don't forget it. I have discovered that the reason why I was having issues with videos and Discord and everything else stuttering so badly in OBS was because I have a bunch of different scenes with video clips, and those video clips, apparently, every time I started up OBS, we're playing all of them at the same time in the background, which as a result was eating up my VRAM and causing all sorts of stuttering and everything else, which is why we've had like gameplay at the beginning of the episode and why I've had to re-add the gameplay footage for the final video version. So my recommendation is that if you have a bunch of video clips, well, actually any time that you put a video clip into OBS that you want to be able to play by pressing a button or whatever, make sure that you have the option on the video file, close file when inactive. If you do that, that will help to prevent having a bunch of video clips basically playing in the background and draining your resources. So then you'll have a much better experience, and then your recording should be a lot better. Now, I will find out with complete certainty once it comes to the point of actually editing the video tomorrow. But the fact that nothing's been stuttering during this recording so far, and usually they're stuttering especially when I'm doing the initial bringing up the clips and all that, that tells me that probably fixed the problem. So that's my first recommendation. Second recommendation, when you are fighting the Dried King and the Coveted in Salt and Sanctuary, use hammers or any weapon with strike damage. So basically, if it has a blade, you don't want to use it, because you use something that's like a hammer, an axe. Well, I don't know if axes count. Clubs, I can't remember what all the different weapons are because I don't have most of them, but use a hammer or a club, things like that. Things that you would womp on stuff because those do more damage to those bosses. And then additionally, when fighting Murdiella Mall, which is an optional boss fight, doesn't even have an achievement tied to it. If you fight her, use blades. So that's what I got for recommendations.
Good stuff.
All right, dissuasions.
Dissuasions. First one is going to be if you are attempting the challenge of the memory of the whip of the vampire killer, do not immediately retry if you fail. Like I said earlier, it doesn't give you a game over, it just kicks you back outside. However, if you use any type of healing items, you do not recover those. So if you've used something that is a bit rare, or just something that's hard to replace, then you have lost that, and you would not be in the challenge. So I would recommend instead just to say, start the save file over again from the last time, and then go through the challenge again. So that way you don't have to worry about wasting resources and trying to restart and redo the fight all over again. So I definitely just recommend doing that instead. My other dissuasion is going to be, do not buy the Steam versions of Resident Evil 1 through 3. These were originally on GOG. However, Capcom is being Capcom again and has put Enigma DRM into these games. And they did the same thing with Dino Crisis 1 through 3, as well as Breath of Fire 4, which they also brought over from GOG. Additionally, these games have been hard to run on the Steam Deck as well. There have been fixes for these games, and you could possibly even just import the GOG file, but if you're going to be going through all of that, and there are a lot of just basic features lacking in there, like no cloud saves, lack of achievements and stuff like that, you really would just be better off getting the GOG version. It's DRM free, and that has shown to be easier just to import the game and run it that way rather than trying to set up the hoops for getting the Steam versions to work on the Steam Deck. So yeah. Do not buy it. Do not support what Capcom has done with this lazy port, which is crazy since it's the same game. It's the game that GOG even worked on. Just get the GOG version instead, and do not get the Steam version.
Agreed. All right. My dissuasions. First of all, I'm sad that I still have to say this, and I'm hoping that in the future I'll be able to flip this around, but I still have to say, don't try to play Death Stranding 2 natively on Steam Deck. If you can stream it from your PC, by all means do that. You'll still have you should have a good experience assuming your PC's strong enough, or I guess even streaming it from your PlayStation if you're just playing it on PlayStation. But yeah, definitely don't play it natively on Steam Deck, especially since it's like 150 gigs. You may as well just stream it because you're going to have a much better experience. My next dissuasion, in episode 5 of Death Stranding 2, which is that boss fight I talked about that I played footage from earlier, do not take off, if you decide to take off your backpack, make sure that you pick it up before you finish the boss fight, or just don't take it off the entire fight. I ended up, one of the times that I did the fight, I had taken it off just to make it easier to get around and everything, and I didn't pick it up before I beat the boss. And then when I got out of that special fight, as soon as I went there, it said your backpack's lost. It's like, dang it.
Oh.
So I mean, it's not like it couldn't be replaced, but it's still, you know, I had it customized and everything with certain attachments that make cargo lighter and that sort of thing. And it's like, yeah, I could get that again, but I'd much rather just pick up what I already have, especially because then that's also any gear that was related to it, weapons and other stuff that was carried on my back. So yeah, there's that. Actually, I think that is it. That's what I have. So, where can people find you?
They can find me on my channel. I am Xeracon. That's IAMXERACON. So youtube.com/@IamXeracon. No new content since I still wasn't feeling well to record. But I do have everything I need for my next video there. So I'm going to start recording, hopefully. Well, I'll see. Maybe this week. Maybe starting next week. And then just getting all that together, and it'll take me a while, but the next video will be a comparison video between 3 different things which share the same number, but that's all safe for now regarding that. And then I have my other channel, Justin's Bible Blog. That's at Justin's Bible Blog. Similar to the previous channel, no, I didn't have time to, I wasn't well enough to record, but I will be getting to recording this week, and then I will hopefully have a video up by the weekends. But yeah, that's everything.
All right. Okay, well, you can find me on my YouTube gaming channel at TheFrozenGamer87. I haven't put anything out new in a while. Last thing was my Why I Love PC Gaming video essay, which is also broken up into a playlist if you don't want to just sit through an entire hour and a half in one go. I don't know when I'm going to get to the next video, but coming up on Friday, April 17th, I'm going to be doing my 7th annual 24-hour charity live stream to raise money for the Extra Life charity, and I need to start doing getting everything set up and tested. Hopefully it won't take quite as much effort to get everything set up as it did for Stack Up last time, since I feel like I got everything well situated and everything from that standpoint. So theoretically, if I just duplicate those channels, update the like banners and whatnot to be Extra Life themed, then it should be fine. But I'm gonna have to try to do some testing over the next week and do some test recordings and streams, and hopefully get everything, well, obviously get everything all ready to go before I do the 24-hour stream. So there's that. There is the YouTube and Rumble channel for the podcast. On YouTube, that's at the Orange Box Podcast. On Rumble, it's not a custom URL, but you can still find us there. The video version of the podcast goes live every Friday at 7 a.m. Central Time, barring any technical issues. The audio-only version goes live on all major audio podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, Deezer, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and others. And that is at 12 a.m. Central Time every Friday, barring technical issues. Lastly, you can, if you would like to contact us, whether you have a question, comment, want to tell us to Persona 3 ourselves, you can write us either through our email, which is the orangeboxpodcast@gmail.com, or you can comment on the video version of the podcast, and we will be sure to read what you have for us on the show. And I don't think there's anything else, so that should be everything. Last chance. Any final thoughts?
No, sir.
All right, well, I am the Frozen Gamer 87. That is I am Xeracon. We are the Orange Box Podcast. And until next time, if you ride around on a piano motorcycle, you too can make it 1,000 miles to see somebody. Orange Box Podcast out.